Okay, everyone, today we're going to look at an extension of our previously learned factoring topic. If you'll remember from last time, we took a look at very similar looking polynomials. They had an x squared at the beginning, followed by either a plus or a minus symbol, and then our x term, but they all had a plus sign at the end. The big difference in the ones that we're going to be looking at right now are these are going to be very similar, except they have a minus sign at the end. So we'll see how those factor just ever so slightly differently, but the process is going to be very similar. Once again, I've got 4 polynomials for you to multiply. Multiply all those together while you're paused, and then come back. Okay, I'm assuming you've done that, and I'm actually just going to go straight to the answers here. Okay, so answers for each of these should have been x squared minus 2x minus 8, x squared minus 4x minus 21, x squared plus 5x minus 36, and x squared minus 5x minus 6. Okay, why don't you take a look, see if you can see again that relationship. It's a very similar relationship between the numbers. Again, you would be, if you were given a problem, be looking at those 2 numbers, and then you'd be trying to come up with those 2. Pause and see if you can figure out what that pattern is. Well, if you'll remember from last time, basically what we found is that the 2 numbers multiplied to the last term in the polynomial added to the middle. It's basically, if you think of those as not 2 and negative 4, if you just think of them as 2 and 4, they multiply to the last and subtract to the middle. Okay, so if we were to think of, for example, in this first one, numbers that multiply to 8 and subtract to 2, we would come up with the only numbers that would work for that are 4 and 2. Okay, so then the question is, well, then how do you know it's what signs go on each of those numbers? That's where you now have to think of, okay, well, it's actually a negative 8 at the end, so I need 1 negative number and 1 positive number, and I need it to be negative 2 in the middle, so my negative 4 better be the bigger of the 2 numbers. Okay, so let's see. Again, if we're putting that into a pattern, that is what we're going to be looking for is, and I really suggest in this situation, guys, ignoring the signs initially, okay? So I would suggest for a pattern, we look for numbers that multiply to the last number and subtract to the middle number when it's subtraction at the end. And then in your final answer, the biggest thing that you have to remember is because it's a negative at the end, it's got to be a plus and a minus in your parentheses. Okay? So let's take a look at some examples of how this factors, and I'll talk you through the process a bit, and then you can try a couple on your own. So for this first one, you would be looking for numbers that multiply to 26 and subtract to 11. Well, there's only 2 sets of numbers that multiply to 26, as far as I know, 26 and 1 and 13 and 2. 13 and 2 are the ones that do subtract to 11. Okay, so now I can start my answer. I know it's x plus and x minus. Sorry about that. X plus and x minus because we have a negative at the end. And I know that my 13 is going to be the one that's negative. I'm sorry, it's going to be the one that's positive because I've got a positive number in the middle, so I want that positive 13 to outweigh the negative 2. If I put it the other way around, that would be the same thing, except it would be a negative 11 in the middle. Why don't you guys try B? It's a pretty similar problem with a positive in the middle and negative at the end. Pause and then come back. Okay, I'm assuming you've done that. Here we would be looking for numbers that multiply to 6 and subtract to 5. Those would be 6 and 1. Okay, don't use 3 and 2. Okay, 3 and 2 subtract. If you subtract them, you get 1. Okay, 6 and 1, if you subtract them, you get 5. And once again, I want my 6 to be positive and my 1 to be negative because I got that positive number in the middle, so it's going to be x plus 6 and x minus 1. Okay? Cool, cool? Let's try two more. This next one I'll try. This is very, very similar to all the previous ones, okay? So the pattern's not really changing a whole lot. We're still looking for multiply to 30 and subtract to 13. Those numbers would be, well, it's not 30 and 1. And if we look at all of the other numbers that multiply to 30, 6 and 5 will not make 13. Some people get confused between 15 and 2 and 10 and 3, but it's definitely 15 and 2 because we're looking for subtract to 13. 10 and 3 don't subtract to 13. They would add to 13. So it's 15 and 2. The difference here is I want it to be x minus 15 and x plus 2, okay, because that'll give me a negative number in the middle because there's more negatives than there are positives. Try D, pause, and then come back. All right, I'm assuming you've done that by now. The numbers you should have found that multiply to 24 and subtract to 10 are 12 and 2. And again, I want that negative on my larger number because I have a negative in the middle. That's it for today.